would you feel about a law that requires people over the age of 70 to pass a specialized driving test in order to continue driving? Here in Illinois, my grandpa had to do it every year after 75. That's a great idea. I'm going to call my 68-year-old congressman and ask him to support such legislation. Most driving laws are passed by state legislators, who usually do drive themselves. Old retired guy here. 74 years old to be precise. I would accept such a test provided it was only to catch really age-related diseases. Dementia, poor reflexes, etc. I live in a retirement community and most of the people who should not have a license have already given them up. The first day I was here I heard a conversation between two guys. Guy 1, I just turned 88 and turned in my driver's license. Guy 2, why would you do that? Guy 1, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm all for retesting people, however, I'm not sure what you mean by specialized. The requirements for good driving don't change with age, so it should be the same test. Ideally, we'd all be retested every 10 years or so until we hit 60, then we're retested every 5 years. However, older folks are a huge voting bloc and it's unlikely this would ever pass. I send patients for driver's evaluations if their ability to navigate through my office is concerningly questionable. Unaware drivers are just as dangerous as impaired drivers. Let me say this about that. The neighbor I love is 93 and still driving, when she's up to it. She can barely see the on-off switch on her vacuum cleaner. Should she be driving? I want her to maintain independence, but at the same time, I don't think it's safe for her or others. Yet the DMV doesn't require her to take a vision exam or a competency test. Please. My grandma is practically blind and went to take her driving vision test to renew her license. She failed, but the lady at the DMV felt bad, so she had her take it again and gave her hints so she could pass it. So now my practically blind grandma is out on the road still. It's for their safety as much as anyone else's. I'm so mad that the lady at the DMV was so irresponsible as to let her keep driving. I'm an IDOC and I'd be all for it. You know how often I get berated or threatened by geriatrics when I strongly suggest that they quit driving because they no longer meet the legal requirements for driving. People should have to retake the driver's test every 10 years if not 20. I've seen too many terrible drivers of all ages. Can we make everyone take it? Seriously, I see more horrible drivers in the commuting age bracket than in the retired age bracket. My fiancé's brother was killed riding his motorcycle Sunday by a 91-year-old who pulled out in front of him. He left behind a wife and 3 children. He was one of the best guys I ever met. We are all devastated and it could have been prevented. That man had no business behind the wheel. I'd be okay with it if over 70 drivers are statistically more likely to get into accidents. We need statistics to show us which demographics cause the most accidents over distance driven. If the over 70 leads in this, then yes. As an insurance professional, just because you have been doing something for a long time, does not mean you are good at it. Drivers should be tested every 5 years, not just once you hit a certain age. Everyone should take a standardized road test every 5 years. I'm for it. The inability for old people to drive would result in them voting en masse for public transportation improvements. By the time the law was passed, self-driving cars will be available. Or how about you just have to do a refresher course every 10 years? There are a lot of people out there with fully functional senses that still need a reminder about the rules of the road. I'd be all for it if we can compensate them by providing transportation to those who can no longer drive for low cost. Self-driving cars may soon fit this position. They should make everyone take driver's ed classes every 10 years. It's ridiculous to think someone who passed driver's ed even 20 years ago knows all the new traffic laws and car technology. This has been tried, but the organizations like AARP are very powerful and shoot down this type of legislation. It's hard enough to book a driving test these days. It takes a good 4 months in the UK. This would worsen the situation. Based on the state of driving I see every day, everyone should have to pass a driver's test every 5 years. It won't happen. I'm assuming you're talking about the US. The DMV is a state-level agency, not federal, so if one state were to have that law, another state may not have it. Over 70? My aunt started getting dementia at 58 and should have had her license taken then and there. Test us every 10 years or with referral from a doc. Perhaps this would be best applied to the overall population. Retest with license renewal every 10-20 years by default, IMO. IMO driving tests in the US need to be more difficult and have the driver face most every scenario with at least 2 versions of each. In addition, this should have to be renewed every like 5 or 10 years with your DAIL. I'm a fire engine driver in OCLA in CA, and there are too many drivers Garden Grove and TLA that don't know to pull over and just stop, or try and make their turn before we catch up. Car accidents are the leading fatality for a reason. Secret to old life like Japan? Better driving habits and rules. I'd rather see mass adoption of autonomous vehicles that would give the elderly the freedom of transportation without the need for driving. I believe they would self-police themselves to autonomous vehicles over driving themselves. In my experience, it seems like everyone needs a refresher after, let's say, 10 years. One reason is traffic laws change WOR knowledge except for maybe an article on page 6 of the paper. For example, I just learned that in PA they passed a law in June 2016 that allows drivers to go through a red light that isn't changing. Also, it seems that everyone thinks that turn signals and speed limits are optional and the left lane is for going the same speed as everyone else. Why is this so highly upvoted? I want everyone to retest every 5 years, period, and I want the test to actually be both relevant to real driving and failable if you suck. Why did this get so many upvotes? It's not funny or some good life hack thread. I've constantly thought this, but I guess just putting as in Ask Reddit would get me 117k